Hey, you like cars? Yo, this was almost like an emergency podcast, but we're going to make it into an episode. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to drive right in because we got something to talk about. Episode 61. Hold on, I'm really not. Episode 61. My goodness, I don't like the way my clapper was sounding. Episode 61, CarQuicks Podcast. Cameron Biggs, your host. Welcome. How are you doing? How are the family, the friends, the children, the people? I'm glad you're here. Glad you checked in once again. If you haven't already, I'm just going to hit the stuff off real quick and rapid fire. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Tell a friend to tell another friend. Tell a cashier. Tell your barista about the CarQuicks podcast to tap in and to listen. We're driving right in. This is almost like an emergency podcast, but it really isn't. I decided to shoot one because we have a very special car to talk about. Similar to what I did with Bugatti and the Tourbillon, we now have something equally as crazy that got announced. So I'm not even going to hesitate. I'm not even going to act like you guys don't already know. If you've been following any of the car news, you know we're here to talk about the Corvette C8 ZR1, and Chevrolet lost their minds. Okay, now before the ZR1 got announced, we had the C8, the regular C8, like you get the Z51 package, you can get the a little bit of the track pack stuff on it. Then we had the Z06. The Z06 was kind of like a nod to like, oh snap, they're really not. They weren't playing around with the regular C8 just by the fact that they finally went mid-engine, a very high-performing sports car. The Z06 came out benchmarking the Ferrari 458 and sounds like it, flat plane V8, sounds nasty. All the reviews and all the drives have been like, this thing is a certified supercar for under supercar money and price. So rumors of the ZR1 were coming up. The ZR1 has always been like the highest performing Corvette. It wasn't track focused. It was very much like a long distance, I'll say Autobahn runner, like I've said before. But what I'm talking about is cars that are a little bit more compliant, a little softer on the ride quality when it's on the road, but incredibly fast and capable. It's not like the ZR1 can't go on the track and destroy whatever lap time you can, but we're going to get to those details in a minute. But let's just talk about what we have here. When this car was being rumored, I mean, at most, I was thinking 800 horsepower. We knew it was going to be twin turbo V8. The Z06 has, 600. So we're thinking 600 plus. We're thinking 800, 850 is like a lot. We're like, yo, this is going to be 850. That's going to be a beast. 900 was like the moonshot. We were like, man, if this thing packs 900, it's over. Let me tell you something. Chevrolet must have heard us talking about all this and said, they ain't even ready for what we're about to do. They're not even ready what we're about to do. So we're just gonna bang off the stats. We're gonna get to the stats of what's happening here. These stats put the ZR1 squarely in what I say arguably hypercar territory. We're well past supercar. The Z06 was considered a supercar. Considering the performance, I know it doesn't have the name Ferrari and Lamborghini and Maserati and Aston Martin, but the performance and what it was doing, you had to step away from the idea that it said Corvette on it and say, listen, what we have here is a supercar by all metrics that we measure supercars by, from the performance numbers to even how it looks, the price point. So the ZR1, I'm arguing, is breathing on hypercar territory, or it's on supercar territory, which is not even a category, but just for the sake of the argument, what do we have? We have a twin turbo V8 with 1,064 horsepower. Let me repeat that one more time. 1,064 horsepower in the new C8 ZR1. It also has 828 foot-pounds of torque. It's a 5.5 liter flat plane crank V8 that redlines to 7,000 RPMs. This is crazy. especially considering, and I don't mean crazy because somebody's going to jump in and say, man, Queen State got 2,300 horsepower. This, the Venom F5 makes 1,800. I know there are other cars that make much more horsepower. I just talked about the Bugatti Tourbillon that makes 1,800 horsepower. I'm talking about, regardless of those hyper cars and that range of $2, $3, $4, $5 million cars, everything else under it, Lamborghinis, Ferrari SF90s, McLaren 720Ss, McLaren Sennas, they're not doing 1,064 horsepower. This is massive. And I also know that some of these horsepower wars, some of this aftermarket stuff that we see with like twin turbo Lamborghinis and whatnot, we kind of get, we become like hardened to these numbers. We're not impressed. We're like, 1,000. I know somebody that got 1,200 in the street car. And regardless of how you see it, I always will look at 1,000 horsepower in a car and think it's something special. I don't care what else is going on. 1,064 is nothing to snuff at, to scoff at, to be like, it's crazy. Factory, warranty, all that, just coming out with 1,000 in the Chevrolet Corvette. We're not talking about something exotic, something bespoke, coach built, something that you have to order and wait 7 years for it to get built and cost you $7 million. No, we're talking about you can walk into the Chevrolet dealership and order a ZR1 and they got 1,000 horsepower in it. This is absolutely crazy. That is 2 LS7s worth of power, just so you know, if we're going to like the old Corvettes. Some of the interesting facts, though, about this engine. The turbos spin at 1.7 times the speed of sound. And in conjunction with that, 20 PSI of boost at full tilt, it produces 37 pounds of thrust from the exhaust. Now, that's a very random stat. But when they said that stat, I was like, so, okay, it's a land jet, basically. That's what you're telling me. You're telling me that the exhaust is pushing out so much exhaust that it's producing thrust like a jet engine. Like, this thing can almost move on its own just off of the engine producing the power and it just coming out the back exiting, which is crazy. So 37 pounds of thrust just based off the fact that this thing is running 20 PSI with these turbos that have almost no lag. See, the turbo lag has been reduced so much because of how they built it, how they, scavenged the exhaust gases. So we're not dealing with 1,000 horsepower that's like an MK4 Super back in the day where you don't feel nothing until 4,500 RPMs and all of a sudden it's 1,000 horsepower and you're trying to grab the wheel and pray. No, this has the torque and the power throughout the power band. The torque number being especially interesting because of how much it is. 828 between 3,000 and 6,000 RPMs. Yeah, there's no dead zones here, man. We got all the power and all the torque throughout the power band, and the mid-range on this probably feels fantastic, especially considering the fact that we're talking about an over 200-mile-an-hour car. No 198. This is solid 215 miles an hour in the model that doesn't have the crazy track pack and all the downforce. Over 205 when you add the track packs that we're going to talk about. And they haven't even confirmed what that number is, but from the tests that they've done, they said they've reached over 205 miles an hour in general. This is certified supercar. We are beyond that now. There's no denying what they have built and what they have done. But what about the speed we'll be talking about? Quarter mile times, we haven't done any instrumental testing. I'm talking numbers that the engineers gave them based off what they've been testing. We still have to wait. This car doesn't come out until 2025. Sometime in the summer, probably spring, because who wants a ZR1 in the winter? Nobody. So quarter mile times from the testing has been under 10 seconds at 150 miles an hour. That track speed alone tells you just what this thing is tracking at the end of that quarter mile. This isn't the E-Ray. It doesn't have all-wheel drive, so we're always going to lose something to traction. So the 0 to 60 time between the Z06 and probably the E-Ray and the ZR1 are probably going to be very close because regardless of how wide these Michelin Sport, Pilot Sport 4S's are or the Cup 2Rs and how much grip they have, you're still sending 1,000 horsepower and especially 800 plus foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheel. So we got to fight against that. The site has a few different design elements that we have. Similar to the C8, but you see a few different things to let you know you're looking at a ZR1 outside of the fact that it has ZR1 badging, obviously. The side vents that you normally see on the Z06, that protrusion that comes out, there's an additional vent right behind it that feeds directly into the engine. The outside, if you're looking at the ZTK package, which I don't know why I thought attack when I saw ZTK and then there was a Z, so it was like Zattack or something. I don't know. My brain was going crazy. Anyways, the ZTK package has, you'll notice, very large rear wing. I don't know if it's out of carbon, but I know that there's a front spoiler, lip spoiler, there's drive planes. This entire package is about downforce, and that full tilt as this thing is running, we're talking about 1,200 pounds of downforce. There is no active aero, and they compared it to like the GT3 RS, which has active aero that produces even higher amounts of downforce. But this is all static downforce, just the wings, the drive planes, everything running 1,200 pounds of downforce. Interior, you're not getting a redesigned interior. Some people might say, well, that's the separation between this and the supercar because they got more bespoke interiors. True indeed. This is still a Corvette, it's still Chevrolet, so we're not trying to make $1 million Corvettes. However, you do get more Alcantara, you get more carbon fiber on the dashboard, you get more things to show you that it's a little bit more special than it was to a regular Z06 or something else prior, especially to a C8. So you're still going to look at it and say, okay, I see. Alcantara, stitching, the carbon fiber, we're looking at the ZR1. Now, else things that are going on in this car. We got diffusers in the back. The non-ZTK equipped ones are the ones that can do up to 250 miles an hour, a little bit more subtle on the outside. They both come in both coupe and convertible versions. The convertible one taking that top off in the car and storing it back in the rear trunk like the normal C8 as well. One thing to remember, though, is that the base ZR1, like I said before when I was talking about the Z06 and the ZR1, is that this is kind of aimed towards more comfort. So let me explain. The Z06 is a track car, out and out. They produced that to basically take on track times and destroy. They wanted to take track times and obliterate them. The ZR1 has the ability to run probably faster than the Z06, maybe. I don't know what they're going to do back to back, but it has track capabilities, but it's aimed at the road and being more compliant. So the interesting fact that I look at this is similar to what Porsche does with the GT2 RS. It's not as hardened as the GT3 RS, but it's still as capable. It's like I've said before, fast, back road, mountain runner, extremely capable car. So the ZR1 is built under the same ideologies, right? The same ideas. Softer, a little bit more compliant until we add the ZTK package. Then we get springs that are stiffer or as stiff as the Z06. So now we have a high performing track car. So outside of that, we got carbon ceramic brakes, some of the biggest brakes they ever put on the Corvette, 15.7-inch rotors in the front, 15.4 inches in the rear, giant 6 piston. I didn't see the piston count on the calipers, but I'd imagine it's either 6 or 8. I mean, we're talking about a 200-mile-an-hour car. We got to stop at a good amount of time. The price, though, hasn't been talked about. And one of those things, and the reason why the price has been talked about is because we don't know the price. But I can tell you, we're looking at a strong, close figure to $200,000, dollars. If the Z06 is 115, 150, if you talk about the markups they had, then 200,000 is very understandable, honestly. And if you think about what this car is doing, the specs, it's almost a bargain. 180,000. If it's anything under 180,000, we're talking about the greatest bargains ever happened. That's probably what's going to go on. So that car and how it delivers and how it drives, considering the price tag, I'm seeing personally, I think 180,000 is where it's going to start. I'm not even getting involved with the markup conversation. They're going to act absolutely dumb when it comes to the markups on this car. They're going to tack on 100K easy on this. They're going to act absolutely foolish. So what else do we know about this? The frunk, the cooling, the engine. Speaking of the cooling areas, one of the very cool features of this car is that it has a split window over the rear engine. Now, why is it a big deal? Because since the 60s, we haven't seen the Corvette have a split window in the rear. And this one, the center vane on the windows helps cool out and extract heat out of the engine. So going back to that cooling thing, the Corvette loses the Frunk on the ZR1 because it has 15 heat exchangers. 15. It's 1,000 horsepower. We got to cool it down. The front area has a main intercooler, and then in the engine, there's 2 additional engine-mounted intercoolers, and we have heat exchangers and radiators all in the front end. So you lose the Frunk for the sake of horsepower. I don't think anybody who's getting a ZR1 is going to be like, yo, I really wish you would have left that Frunk and, you would have had a buyer. So no Frunk, you gave it up for horsepower, you gave it up for performance, and that's what we're doing here. You still got the rear trunk area. I'm sure some of the other accessories might be fitted luggage or whatever it may be. I'm sure they're going to do something for the client and the customer who's going to buy this car. But speaking of the ZR1, I just can't wait until they test it up against other cars that are in this interesting high ranked realm of like American sports cars. And I'm speaking about the Mustang GTD. Now, the Mustang GTD is 800 horsepower and a built motor, track-oriented Mustang, $325,000. And the reason why I bring that up is because when I look at the ZR1, everybody's going to look at these numbers and look at the Mustang and say, I don't know what the Mustang weighs. I don't think it's too far off of this 3,950 pounds the ZR1 weighs. It could be lighter. I'm sure it is if you take away the fact that it isn't twin turbo and all that other stuff. But it has 800 horsepower, down 200 to the ZR1. And so most of the conversation is going to be, I want to see these two cars go heads up, because outside of the GTD, we don't have a Viper. The Viper ACR doesn't exist anymore. It's not out. Dodge isn't trying to make another Viper, even though seeing the ZR1 and the GTD is kind of like people looking at Dodge like, yo, just bring back the Viper for one more time, make a $200,000-$300,000 version, and let's get to the races. So that's going to be a cool thing to see GTD against the ZR1. I know it's not I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison. I just think that they're both extremely capable cars. And even though the Mustang is down on horsepower, I think we could be surprised with how it performs. Though somebody would argue the Z06 is more of a competitor to the GTD. I'm just going off the price. If they're charging $325,000 for the GTD, that's what I'm saying. The ZR1 is under 200, bargain in the realm of that car. I'm not talking about like it's a bargain, like, yo, it only costs $30,000. So I'm interested in seeing what that's going to bring. It's going to be exciting to see. I'm glad to see these type of cars are still being produced. We have very much have been told as car enthusiasts that what we like to do and what we like doesn't really bode well for what the future holds. Okay, it's electric cars, it's non-engaging cars, a visceral experience, is noise, and we don't want to hear it. So to see Chevrolet say, we had to make sure this wasn't a hybrid. We had to make sure that this was kind of a really good send-off to the gentleman that's been working on these Corvettes for many, many years. Who's retiring. I forgot his name. But the send-off, or just basically this next iteration of ZR1, they said it had to be an ICE motor. It couldn't be hybrid. It couldn't be electric. And it's funny because that conversation, I've talked on my last podcast about EVs and some of these companies kind of dialing back their ambitious roadmap that they had before. And Rimac, who is working with Bugatti, and they've made really crazy electric hypercars, even they said, we're not making the sales we have, because when you start talking about this $2 million range, it's hard to convince somebody to get a Rimac Nevera for the same price as a Koenigsegg. I mean, I'm going to get a Koenigsegg. I don't care what that Nevera is doing. I don't care how much faster it can be on a quarter mile or 0 to 60. That's cool. And I think that's what's going to start separating people to understand that car enthusiasts, while we've always looked at numbers in 0 to 60 and quarter mile times, it wasn't the end all be all. And I think electric cars and why they put hybrid and stuff is because they might see, hey, if we can show them it does 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, we're going to win all the car enthusiasts. And it's like, yeah, to a degree, but there's more to the car experience than just how fast can I get from this number to this number. So the ZR1 is coming. I'm not keeping this long. We just only got this release. We had a little press event. It showed off the car. Chevrolet did say that the reason why they announced the ZR1 this early, because it comes out in 2025, isn't to just get people excited to, let's say, help their nameplate and help them, with whatever their stock options. They have to do this because they have further testing to do, and they need to basically decamouflage the cars. They can't have camouflage on them when they're talking about what's the overall weight, the thermal dynamics, how it does aerodynamically. They basically need to make sure these cars are on the street being seen in their full factory package and how they perform. So they said there's still other work to be done. I don't think the work includes more horsepower, but little tweaks, the devil's in the details, as they say. So all the little things that they're talking about when it comes to producing this car, they have to continue to work on, and I'm excited to see it. So Corvette ZR1, C8 ZR1. I mean, you want to talk about such a massive jump from the previous ZR1. Even the C7 ZR1 was a 755 horsepower car, and that sounded nuts. This is 1,064. That's over 300 horsepower more. Crazy times, man. These cars they're just out of control fast. But glad you can join me. As I always say, besides the fact that I say it's the greatest automotive podcast that you could possibly listen to, but I always say is do as you wish and do as you may. Thank you for joining me for this little special tidbit of information on the Corvette ZR1. We got more to come. This is just the beginning. This car is going to be one of the ones we talk about for many years. But until then, I'll see you on the next episode. We talk about some more car news sometime in the week following. Enjoy these 2 back-to-back episodes, basically, and I'll be back for more. It's CarQuicks. I'll see you around. Peace.